I'm going to show you how our new print and digital components work together to support students' numeracy development and how that leads into OLNA readiness by year 10. And importantly, we haven't made this just about passing OLNA. We built numeracy in from year 7 onwards. Even a question like this one from SCARS's sample tests looks straightforward, but there are multiple skills involved. For some students, their foundation skills are weak. They never properly grasp some primary maths. The other stumbling block with OLNA and numeracy in general is that students are struggling before the maths even begins. So that might be understanding the question, choosing the right method, and then carrying out the steps. So the issue isn't just that students need more practice, which is what we see in other resources, it's where they're getting stuck in the process. So what we've tried to do here is not just give more questions, but identify where students are struggling and then combine teaching, modeling, and practice to address that. So in years 7 to 9, teachers are working with the whole cohort, so the focus is on building numeracy skills progressively and developing good problem-solving habits. If students improve these skills, they may be able to pre-qualify through NAPLAN in year 9 and then avoid OLNA altogether, which would be the ideal. By year 10, that shifts. Teachers know which students are working towards OLNA. In the print, but particularly referred to OLNA directly where we haven't done that in the 7 to 9, not just where we talked about numeracy in those years. We reinforce the foundation skills and we build assessment strategies in that year 10 one. So the overall structure reflects that development, building up through years 7 to 9 and then resetting to the essentials in year 10 and applying them in an assessment context. So the print material, this supports this in a practical way from year 7. It starts with key foundation skills and strategies with worked examples and the familiar now you try questions that we see elsewhere in the textbook. So students can immediately apply what they've seen. And we have this new feature, these notepad boxes, which you can see on the right, like a little spiral notepad. They highlight the essential points. They support revision and reinforcement, and for assessments, they can also be used as a kind of structured brain dump, which is an idea we got from a teacher who is an expert on teaching OLNA students. So the idea behind this is that these students struggle with working memory. So they might know a fact like whether to multiply by 100 or 1,000 to convert kilometers to meters, but when they're in the middle of a multi-step problem, it becomes harder to recall because they're holding other information in their mind. So we suggest to students this idea that at the start of an assessment, they spend a couple of minutes writing down key facts or strategies, which they've learned from the notepad boxes, ones that they know, but when they're under pressure, they can't reliably access. So they write these down and then they can use it as a kind of reference sheet throughout the test, which frees up their working memory and they can focus on the problem itself. So we also introduce a simple problem-solving flowchart. So for teachers, this can be used to help identify where students are getting stuck through a sort of student-teacher conversation. You can ask them to read the question carefully and identify the important words. Can the student reword the question, which demonstrates that they can understand what's being asked? Can they decide what maths is needed to solve the problem, and then can they do the maths, and then have they answered the question given, and does the answer properly apply to the original question? And then for students, they can use this flowchart as a clear step-by-step structure that they can follow when approaching unfamiliar problems. So it works both as a teaching tool and a scaffold for students' thinking. And then following this process, we have some detailed worked examples of OLNA-style word problems with now you try questions so students can practice immediately. So in the digital tool, we bring those concepts together in a simple structure. It combines a diagnostic skill check and then some targeted support and structured practice. So instead of students just doing more questions like in other resources, we can identify gaps and then work on those specific areas where they're struggling. The skill check is the diagnostic component. It breaks problems into steps so we can see exactly where the student is getting stuck. So that, as I said before, that might be understanding the problem, choosing a method, or carrying out the calculation. And importantly, as you can see on the right, the students are shown the correct answer at each step. So once they've answered, it will then demonstrate, like if they got that wrong, it will show them the correct answer. So they can continue through the problem. This allows us to see how they perform in the later stages of the problem, even if they get stuck earlier on. So if they cannot understand the problem, we might find out later on that they're not good at interpreting a problem, but they can actually carry out the maths required later on. And we know that limited calculator access can be a major obstacle for students in OLNA. In the skill check, the final questions allow students to use the on-screen calculator. These questions mirror earlier ones, which allows you to compare performance with and without calculator access. So if a student performs much better with the calculator, this may indicate that number fluency is an area that the teacher needs to target. So once those gaps are identified through the first skill check, the next step is targeted support. This is a combination of Hot Maths primary resources because we want to reinforce those foundation skills, and we know that Hot Maths already has great resources for this, and that bridges the foundation gaps. And then we also have new walkthroughs that we're writing with accompanying videos, which are designed for OLNA style questions. And the walkthroughs, they follow the same problem-solving process as described in the print book. And you may be familiar with this if you've used walkthroughs in in the rest of the series that they're on the ITV. They have conditional feedback, and that the feedback given, it depends on the student's answer. So they only see the extra scaffolding if they need it, which preserves productive students hit a complete dead end. So this follow-up work can be assigned by the teacher, but also if you have a student who's motivated or parents who are motivated to get them going, they can be student directed. And then teachers can choose the topics manually, or they can be directed by results from the skill check, or if they do practice pathway, which I'll talk about next, they can do it following from results from that. So the final stage is practice. So we have a bank of OLNA style questions that can be used for full 45 question tests on a range of topics that replicate OLNA. And there's an optional timer for this for the full test, because we know that managing time is a skill itself, and something that we hear from teachers is something that students struggle with, so they need that practice. We can also create 10 question mini tests using the skill check results or the results from other practice tests that a student may have done. You can select topics for the mini test. Or you might just know that your class needs some practice on ratios, time, and reading tables, so you manually select those topics for a mini test. So there are multiple ways to create those tests. And like the targeted support, the walkthroughs, videos, etc., this can be assigned as follow-up work, or students can use them independently. And we have the reporting from the practice pathway that shows growth across attempts and highlights weak areas, which makes it easy to track improvement over time. So the final piece on this is the reporting. So if you've been using our diagnostics tool already, this will feel familiar. Teachers can view results at different levels, from overall performance down to specific questions or skills. For example, from the skill check, you'll be able to see results by question for a whole class, as I've shown here. Or you can delve into the stages of the problem solving, that understanding, choosing the method, etc., that regularly trip a student up. And you can also compare those non-calculator versus calculator questions that I described earlier to compare a student's skills in that. So what this means is that you're not just seeing a score, but you're seeing patterns where students are struggling, what they're improving in, and how that changes over time. That growth is so important for students to see. And this dashboard reporting is also